Hello and welcome to my tutorial on how to draw grass in coloured pencils. I start by putting down some cream in the areas where I want the sunlight spots to be, and then I go over the whole lot with the cadmium yellow lemon and block down the whole area with that colour because that's the colour of most of the highlights. Next I take the light green and using short strokes I go over most of the area, putting in the next sort of shade of green. I put some strokes in the sunspots, but I make sure I don't do too many because I do want those to end up lighter than the areas around them. Next I take a pencil called grass green and do the same thing. I'm slowly building up the darker green areas using short strokes and just layering that down on top of the other layers already down. The grass that I'm drawing is a clumping grass, so when I'm doing the direction of the strokes of pencil I am working in clumps and they're not all going in the same direction. I then take permanent green and continue building up the darker areas, making sure that I don't go over the lighter areas too much. These strokes are really working into the shadows, not blades of grass, but are actually the shadows within each of the clumps of grass. Next I take the permanent green olive, which is a nice more olivey green than what I've been using previously, and put that into the darkest of the shadowed areas. I then blend it out using Spectrum Odourless Solvent, and that's just on a filbert brush. I am careful on the lightest areas where the sunspots are not to blend the greens into them because otherwise you'd lose those spots. At this point I then repeat that process all over again. I start with the cadmium yellow lemon and follow on with the light green, grass green, permanent green olive, and also a chrome oxide green. And I just do short strokes and work in clumps of grass, building up the shadowed areas and the darkest parts green. It is important to keep the strokes short, otherwise you'll end up with long grass rather than the short grass that I'm looking for. If you do all the strokes in one direction, it will also end up looking unnatural because the grass that I'm drawing is a clumping grass, and you usually find that most grass tends to be clumping rather than all going in one direction unless it's very, very long. When using the two darkest pencils, do be careful not to go overboard. You don't want to put too many dark shadows in all over the place, otherwise the grass will end up being really, really dark and it won't look as realistic. You don't want too many shadows. You still want to be able to see all the highlights of the layers that you've done before. I keep going over it with the different greens until I get the clumps looking the way that I want them. And then I proceed to blend it again just to get all those colours looking nicely together. I make sure that I don't blend over the sunspots, otherwise you will lose those and it'll just become one big green patch instead of the patchy sunspots that you want. You'll notice that I used a brown then. It was a walnut brown, and that was just to add some brownish spots into the grass to make it look a little bit more dry than the lush grass that it was looking like before. And I blend it and then continue adding little tiny strokes in with the dark green to further define those little tiny shadows. I use really short strokes because I don't want any of these shadows to appear very large at all. I then take a luminance white pencil and go over and add highlights to all the sunspots and into some of the other areas of the grass. I just do tiny little strokes, and that helps to make some of the blades of grass stand out as if they're reflecting light. I continued doing this process over the rest of the picture to finish off the grass in all of the foreground of my picture with the wallabies. I hope you've enjoyed watching this tutorial. Thank you.